It all started on a rainy Tuesday. The kind of day that makes you want to curl up with a blanket and forget the world exists. Right? Except I didn't have the luxury of staying in bed. Nope. Instead, I was trudging back from the grocery store, arms full of bags, my umbrella fighting the wind like it was in some kind of personal vendetta against me. And then, as I fumbled with my keys to get into the apartment, I noticed something different. The front door was slightly ajar. Now, I'm not usually paranoid, but the only time the door gets left open around here is when I do it. And I'm pretty sure I hadn't. So, naturally, I did what anyone in my situation would do. I froze, bags still dangling from my arms, and stared at the door like it might suddenly sprout teeth and attack me. Okay, calm down, I muttered to myself, stepping closer. It's probably just the wind. I pushed the door open cautiously, trying not to make a sound. As I entered the apartment, a soft, rhythmic hum filled the air. It was new. I hadn't heard it before. I followed the sound, taking slow steps toward the living room. There, standing in the middle of the room, was a figure I knew well, but not exactly the way I expected to find her. Lyra, my alien roommate. Now, to be fair, I didn't ask for an alien roommate. It's not like I went to Craigslist, typed in alien roomie, must be chill, and waited for some intergalactic responses. No, the whole thing was an accident, a bureaucratic mix-up. You see, I signed up for a standard roommate search through some government program that pairs people with non-Earth beings for interspecies cultural exchange. The fine print clearly said the exchange would involve minimal emotional attachment and casual living arrangements. Somehow, that's how I ended up with Lyra. She was supposed to be just a short-term experiment, learning about Earth and humans in a comfortable home environment. And by the time I realized the paperwork had gone through, well, it was too late. The government doesn't exactly take no thanks for an answer when it comes to interplanetary housing arrangements. But back to the present. There Lyra was, standing in the living room like she owned the place, holding what looked like a blender? No, wait. It was more like a glowing, semi-transparent ball of light hovering in her hands. Lyra? I asked, stepping inside, the door creaking shut behind me. She turned around. Her skin was a strange shade of teal, her eyes large and luminous, almost glowing. Her head was slightly larger than a human's, with delicate, tendril-like hair that shifted colors depending on her mood, or maybe the level of the ambient light. At the moment, her hair was a soothing lavender, which I assumed meant she wasn't upset. But who knows with aliens? Oh, hello! Her voice sounded like a mix between a soft hum and a wind chime, clear but also slightly ethereal. She seemed genuinely happy to see me. I was just experimenting with your Earth, appliance? I think you call it a blender? It's fascinating. I've learned several ways it can be used to communicate through vibrations. I blinked, confused. You? What? Lyra smiled, which is a very strange thing for an alien to do. When she smiled, her face didn't change much, but the way her irises rippled suggested some form of amusement, or at least an attempt at it. You see, on my planet, we use sound vibrations to communicate emotions. The blender here has similar properties. So I thought I would. Wait. I interrupted, taking a step back. You're trying to talk to me with a blender? Not just any blender, she said, holding it up proudly. This one is specifically designed to send very specific emotional frequencies. I'm trying to convey warmth, understanding, and possibly a small amount of confusion. Okay, right. I glanced at the object again, half expecting it to start emitting some kind of mind-bending alien signal. But nothing happened. Maybe it was just a blender after all. Well, that's great, but why is the door open? And why are you? Oh, I was attempting to clean your bathroom sink. I used my telekinetic field to adjust the plumbing settings, but I must have overcompensated, and the sink is gone. I stared at her. Gone? You made the sink disappear. Well, it's not exactly gone, she said thoughtfully. More like relocated to a different space-time continuum. I'm still trying to figure out how to bring it back. It's probably in a parallel dimension by now. Shouldn't be too hard to retrieve. This, of course, wasn't the first time Lyra had done something like this. I was getting used to her odd ways, but there was always that moment of shock when she would casually mention bending the laws of physics with a flick of her wrist. Just the other day, she told me she accidentally turned my toaster into a mini black hole. All right, so no sink. Got it, I said, shaking my head. And the door. Oh, she said with a slight tilt of her head. I thought I heard a sound from the hallway and assumed it was an intergalactic communication device, so I opened it. Is that a problem? No, I sighed. I just wasn't expecting, to find the door wide open. She beamed, which I think was her version of a human shrug. Apologies. It's a bit tricky to adjust to Earth customs. I'm still learning. And that was the thing about Lyra. She was an alien, yes, but she wasn't some cold, calculated extraterrestrial being. She had a certain charm, even if she didn't always get human behavior. Sure, she was prone to making the occasional catastrophic mistake, but she genuinely wanted to understand Earth, and more importantly, she was trying to make this whole living situation work. Even if it meant awkward moments like this. I leaned against the counter and sighed, setting my grocery bags down. So what else is new? Aside from the sink and the door and the blender communication system. Lyra's expression shifted as if she were about to say something important. She looked at me with wide, hopeful eyes, and I had a sinking feeling that whatever was coming next wasn't going to be as easy to brush off as the sink. She didn't answer right away, and for a moment, I almost wished she'd just gone back to experimenting with that blender. Because, sometimes it was easier to deal with her eccentricities than whatever was coming next. I was thinking, she said slowly, her voice almost a whisper, about mating. And just like that, I realized my alien roommate wasn't just into weird appliances. She was seriously thinking about taking our living arrangement to a whole new level. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Lyra was, to put it mildly, different. Not just in the obvious she's an alien way, but in all the little details that made living with her an interesting experience. There were the typical things, like her glowing skin, which pulsed with subtle shades depending on her mood. Her eyes were unervingly large, framed by delicate, almost liquid-like tendrils that rippled when she moved. She was also incredibly tall, easily a head above me, and always barefoot, even in the dead of winter. But what really set her apart, aside from the whole alien thing, were the habits that made me question how much I actually knew about being human. Take food, for example. Lyra had this weird thing with Earth cuisine. Mostly because she didn't quite understand the concept of eating. She didn't need food, at least not the way I did, but she insisted on trying everything I put in my mouth. At first, it seemed cute, like a little alien trying to understand human culture. But by the time we were a few weeks into living together, I started to get concerned for my pantry. Do you always eat these pizzas, or is it a special occasion? She asked one night, her large purple eyes fixed intently on the half-eaten slice in my hand. It's just dinner, I replied, taking a bite. It's, a pretty standard thing here on Earth. Lyra cocked her head to the side. But you consume it in such large quantities. Wouldn't it be easier to just absorb the nutrients through your skin, like the Procloxy do on my homeworld? The Procloxy, huh? And they don't eat. Oh no. They feed on sunlight and the faint hum of the planet's core, she said, her tendrils vibrating with excitement. Very efficient. And they don't have to deal with digestion issues. I raised an eyebrow. Okay, I think I'm fine with pizza and digestion issues. She watched me closely as I ate, making notes in her mental journal or whatever alien process she was using to catalog this bizarre human behavior. After a minute of awkward silence, she asked, So, do you enjoy it? The food? Yeah, I do, I said, swallowing the last bite. Pizza's pretty great, but I guess you could say it's an acquired taste. You wouldn't get it right away. Oh, I see, she said, her face lighting up. So, it's like learning how to sing in a foreign language. It doesn't make sense at first, but eventually you get the hang of it. I blinked. Exactly. Kind of. Great. I'll try the pizza tomorrow then. She made a note on her holographic pad, floating just in front of her face. But I'm not sure about the cheese. It seems to confuse your digestive system. I've been analyzing your gastrointestinal reactions to dairy and I quickly changed the subject, not sure I wanted to know where that conversation was going. Let's talk about something else. And then there was the matter of her telekinesis. It wasn't the kind of telekinesis where she could, throw stuff across the room. No, Lyra's telekinesis was subtle. More like a gentle wave of energy that bent things to her will without any visible effort. She could rearrange the furniture, adjust the thermostat, or make my coffee maker brew just the right amount of coffee at the perfect temperature. All without lifting a finger. The problem? She didn't always understand the limits of it. The other day, I came into the living room to find the couch floating about a foot off the ground, suspended by a field of glowing purple energy. Lyra was sitting cross-legged underneath, staring at it intently. Lyra, what the heck? I asked, a bit panicked. Why is the couch floating? Oh, I just thought it would be more comfortable for you. You see, on my homeworld, we don't sit on chairs or sofas. We levitate during conversations. Well, I'm glad you're thinking of me, but I kinda like my furniture firmly planted on the ground, I said, scrambling to catch the coffee mug that was now sliding off the floating armrest. Understood, she said with a chirp, a wave of her hand, and the couch gently descended to the floor. I'll make a note to respect your earth furniture customs in the future. Do you want me to install levitation pads under your bed, though? I think it would improve your sleep quality by 12.7%. Lyra, I said slowly, no levitation pads under my bed. I'm just trying to sleep like a normal human. She nodded as if she understood, but I knew better than to take her word for it. A day later, I found my bed floating a few inches above the floor. So yeah, living with Lyra was an adventure, but as weird and unpredictable as it could be, I couldn't help but feel a strange kind of affection for her. She wasn't malicious. She was just learning about Earth in the only way she knew how, with an unshakable sense of curiosity and a willingness to experiment without understanding the consequences. But that was Lyra for you, always trying, always experimenting, always coming up with wild ideas. And no matter how strange it got, she was oddly endearing in her weirdness. Take the other morning, for example. I woke up to the smell of something burning, not a good sign. I rushed into the kitchen to find Lyra, standing in front of the stove, holding a pan that was glowing bright green. There was a loud sizzling sound, and I noticed a small fire forming around the edges. What are you doing? I asked, half dazed from sleep. I'm attempting to cook an Earth breakfast burrito, Lyra explained with wide eyes. I've been studying your culinary videos on this streaming site you call YouTube. This one had great reviews, but the instructions are a little unclear. I think I added too much heat. Too much heat? You've set the whole kitchen on fire. Oh, well, it wasn't on purpose. She tilted her head, clearly fascinated by the flames. But it seems like a common mistake. The instructions do say to cook on high heat. That's not exactly what they meant. Lyra? I groaned, trying to grab the fire extinguisher from the cupboard. She watched me in fascination as I doused the flames. I suppose I misinterpreted the concept of high heat. As the fire died down, I took a deep breath. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Maybe just stick to things that don't involve fire next time. Lyra's tendrils twitched in what I assumed was embarrassment. Apologies. I will review my cooking methods and adjust. Despite the minor disasters, I had to admit, she wasn't bad company. Yeah, she didn't understand pizza. She set things on fire, and she had a tendency to rearrange my furniture without warning. But she was trying. And in her own weird way, she was doing her best to fit into a world that made no sense to her. Sometimes I think that's all any of us are really doing. And speaking of things that don't make sense, the whole mating conversation from last night, I wasn't sure how to handle that one. Lyra's idea of dating might involve telekinetically rearranging my organs or perhaps trying to communicate emotionally via blenders. But it seemed like a conversation we needed to have soon. Because if there was one thing I was certain of, it was that things with Lyra were about to get a lot more complicated. And this wasn't just about pizza anymore. The whole mating thing wasn't exactly what I'd expected when I first signed up for this intergalactic roommate situation. I mean, I thought we were just going to be roommates, right? Sharing the same space, occasionally getting into awkward situations with her alien customs, maybe having some weird conversations about Earth's food or entertainment. But not this. I had just returned from my grocery run, hoping to escape the chaos of Lyra's latest experiment, only to walk in on the most uncomfortable, confusing, and, frankly, terrifying conversation of my life. I was thinking, Lyra had said, her voice soft and serious in a way I hadn't heard before, about mating. It wasn't the kind of thing you expect to hear from a roommate, especially not an alien roommate. And even more so when you realize she's still trying to figure out things like human emotions and culture. She must have sensed my confusion, because she immediately started explaining. I've been observing Earth mating rituals, she continued, and I've concluded that this is a biological imperative for your species. I am, of course, aware of the variety of customs. The dating process seems to be particularly complex, but based on my research, I believe it is important for a human to find a mate, and I would like to understand what that involves. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. Was she asking me out? Was this some kind of alien cultural misunderstanding? I mean, how could she even know what mating was? She was from a completely different planet. How would she even think that would work between us? Lyra? I stammered, trying to stay calm. You're an alien. I'm a human. I don't think. I know it might seem unusual, she interrupted, her tendrils flicking with what seemed like nervous energy. But humans and aliens are compatible, aren't they? I've analyzed your species' biological structure. It seems feasible. I've also reviewed videos of your mating dances on Earth. I believe they are important for establishing social bonds. Wait, mating dances? I almost choked on the words. Are you telling me you've been watching dating shows? Or what? Is this some kind of research thing for you? Yes, Lyra said with an intense look in her large eyes. I've learned a lot from your Earth romance reality programs. They seem very informative about your species' emotional processes. I find it fascinating how you humans. Lyra, no. I was panicking now. You can't just decide to start dating someone because of a couple of reality TV shows. This isn't like some documentary series. This is real life. She tilted her head to the side, looking as though I were the one who was completely out of touch. I understand. I did not intend to offend you, but I've also been watching videos on what humans call courtship rituals, and I understand that you might require time and space to process these things. I put my hands over my face, trying to get a grip. Courtship rituals? Oh my God. You've been studying everything, haven't you? You've watched all the wrong things. I watched a documentary on human romantic comedies, too, Lyra added helpfully. It seems that humor and light-hearted interactions are important in forming bonds. I'm also very good at mimicry. I've been practicing my human laugh. Would you like to hear it? No, I said quickly, suddenly feeling trapped in a sitcom. Lyra, please let's not make this more awkward. We're roommates, okay? Just roommates. I'm not looking for anything more. She looked puzzled. But we share a living space, which means we are, in a sense, already bonded. Humans do not live alone in these arrangements. I've read that you often form partnerships that are emotional and physical. Yeah, we do. But not like that. I almost shouted. I paced around the kitchen, trying to keep my voice steady. You don't just jump into something because you think it's what you're supposed to do. It's complicated. Relationships are built over time. And there are boundaries, okay? Like personal space and comfort zones. Her tendrils fluttered anxiously as she processed my words. I see, she said after a long pause. I must have misunderstood your emotional boundaries. I thought perhaps we could form a closer bond, considering we are already living together. No, that's not what I mean, I said, finally taking a seat across from her. Look, I care about you. You're a great roommate, but that doesn't mean I want to get into a romantic relationship with you. I don't even know if it's even possible for humans and aliens to date, let alone, mate. It's a lot more complicated than you think. Lyra was quiet for a moment. Her eyes seemed to flicker with a mix of confusion and something else. Maybe even hurt. But I thought that is the goal of your species. To find someone to mate with. Is that not what humans want? Well, yes, but not just anyone. I ran my hands through my hair, frustrated. It's about connection, Lyra. You don't just hook up with the first person who offers. There's more to it than that. It's emotional, not just physical. You have to trust someone first. And sometimes, even then, it doesn't work out. I see, she said quietly, her voice losing its usual cheerfulness. So it is not simply a matter of biology. There is something more intangible. I didn't understand that. I apologize. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. She was clearly trying to understand Earth's complex systems of relationships, and here I was, shutting her down. I wanted to be kind, but I also needed her to know that this wasn't just something that could be solved with alien logic. It's okay, I said after a pause, softening my tone. You don't need to apologize. It's just, you can't really expect to just know this stuff overnight, right? It's something people take time to learn. It's about understanding who you are with, getting to know each other, building trust, and, well, going from there. Lyra nodded slowly, her tendrils curling inward in what I recognized as her version of deep thought. That makes sense. So, I shouldn't have assumed this was an easy process. No, I said, laughing nervously. You shouldn't. But look, I'm happy to help you understand these things. It's just, maybe we can take it slow, Not rush into anything. You're still learning about Earth and, well, I'm still figuring out what it means to live with an alien roommate. It's a lot to unpack. Understood. She straightened up, her eyes brightening again. I can do that. I'll study more about your culture and the concept of romantic attachment. Perhaps we could start by watching another film together? A human romantic comedy? Sure, I said, chuckling a little. Maybe something without dancing, or blenders, and definitely no courtship rituals. Lyra grinned, her tendrils vibrating slightly in excitement. I'll make a note of that, no dancing. Perhaps we could try something called Netflix and chill. That seems to be a common human activity. The next few days were, to put it mildly, a mess. Lyra had taken my advice to take things slow to heart, but of course, she still managed to do it in the most Lyra way possible. I couldn't have predicted how far she would go in her attempt to understand Earth's romantic customs, but one thing was clear. She was really trying. The first sign that things were heading in the wrong direction happened after breakfast. I was sitting at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, when Lyra walked in with a tray of what looked like breakfast in bed? Morning, she chimed brightly, her tendrils waving in greeting. She placed the tray down in front of me with an air of triumph. I made breakfast as an offering of my sincerity. I believe this is an appropriate gesture for deepening bonds. I blinked at the tray. It was definitely an attempt. It was a mishmash of things that probably didn't belong together. But she was trying. There was a bowl of mashed bananas with something resembling scrambled eggs and what appeared to be some kind of alien fruit that I didn't recognize but had a faint greenish glow to it. The fruit was sitting precariously next to a pile of what looked like burnt toast. In short, it looked like a disaster, but hey, at least she was giving it a shot. You made this for me? I asked, unsure if I should feel touched or worried about the greenish glow in the fruit. Yes, she said, standing proudly with her hands clasped behind her back. I studied human traditions regarding meals shared with potential mates. This is what I've come to understand is appropriate. Right? I said, gingerly picking up the toast and taking a bite, immediately regretting it as the burnt taste hit my tongue. Thanks, Lyra. It's definitely something. She nodded eagerly, watching me with what looked like intense anticipation, her tendrils vibrating slightly. Do you like it? Yeah, I mean, it's an acquired taste, I said, grimacing slightly but trying to be polite. Maybe a little less burnt next time? She tilted her head, seemingly processing the feedback. I understand. Less burning next time. Then, with a bit of hesitation, she added, So, is this what humans call a romantic gesture? I almost choked on the mashed bananas, spluttering out the words. Lyra, no. This is not a romantic gesture. It's a nice attempt, but romantic gestures don't usually come with burnt toast and alien fruit. Her tendrils drooped a bit, and her glowing skin dimmed, signaling that she was disappointed. Oh, I see. I misinterpreted again. It took everything in me to not burst out laughing at how sincerely apologetic she looked. Here was this giant alien trying to understand one of the most intricate and sometimes ridiculous parts of human behavior, and she just kept getting it wrong. I sighed, rubbing my face. Lyra, I appreciate the effort, I really do, but this is something that you can't force. You've got to learn to understand human connection before thinking about all the gestures and the mating rituals. It's about understanding each other. I understand, she said quietly, clearly feeling a little defeated. But I'm still trying to understand you, too. You are complex. I smiled at her, trying to ease the tension. Yeah, that's true. We humans are definitely complex. Just as I thought I could let this awkward breakfast moment slide, Lyra took it one step further. Later that afternoon, I came home from running errands to find the apartment suspiciously quiet. Lyra was always around, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but something felt off. I walked into the living room to find her sitting on the couch, holding a small velvet box. She looked up at me, her large eyes wide with what could only be described as earnestness. I've been doing more research, she said in a soft, almost conspiratorial voice, and I believe I have found what you humans call a gift for your potential mate. Lyra? I started, slowly stepping forward. Please tell me you didn't. But before I could finish, she opened the box with a flourish, revealing a glittering object that looked like it belonged in a high-end jewelry store, except for the fact that it had several additional limbs sprouting out of it. It was a strange combination of metal and organic material, the shimmering silver and green hues blending together, with little moving tendrils writhing in the air as though they were reaching for something. It made my skin crawl. What is that? I asked, stepping back, unsure of whether to laugh or scream. This is what you humans call an engagement ring, correct? Lyra asked with complete seriousness. It is a bond-affirming gesture. I have found this one in the Earth Culture archives. It seemed like the perfect way to show you how serious I am about deepening our connection. Lyra, I said, nearly panicking. That's not how this works. This isn't an engagement ring. You can't just give someone a bond-affirming object without knowing what it actually means. She paused, clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation. But I thought humans did this as a form of communication. This object would signal our bond. I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. I get it. Okay? You're trying to show you care. But in human culture, engagement rings mean something very specific. It's a commitment. A huge one. You can't just... I see, she said, cutting me off. I misunderstood again. I thought this would be the next logical step, based on the information I gathered. I will return it. I had to stifle a laugh at how mortified she looked. I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but the idea of being given an engagement ring by an alien who didn't even understand the concept of relationships was beyond ridiculous. But then again, it was also kind of sweet that she was so eager to show she cared, even if she had the worst possible timing. No, Lyra, it's okay, I said, giving her a small smile. I'm not mad. It's just, maybe don't buy engagement rings next time. Okay? She nodded solemnly, closing the box and setting it down next to her. Understood. I will research more about the nuances of human relationships and try to avoid overstepping in the future. I sighed with relief. Thanks, Lyra. I don't want things to get weird. We're roommates, and I want us to be able to enjoy living together without all of this pressure. Lyra nodded again, her tendrils vibrating with what I assumed was a mix of apology and understanding. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I did not intend to disrupt our living arrangement. You didn't, I assured her. You just didn't understand. But I'm glad you're trying. And in a weird way, I realized that no matter how many mistakes Lyra made, how many awkward situations she dragged me into, she was trying. And that effort, no matter how misguided, was something I couldn't ignore. The whole mating thing? Yeah, it was a complete disaster. But if I was going to survive living with an alien, I had to take the humor, the weirdness, and the genuine effort she was putting in stride. Because if this was the future of intergalactic roommate situations, I was in for one heck of a ride. After the engagement ring incident, things didn't exactly settle down. If anything, they only got more complicated. It had been a couple of days since the whole gift disaster, and I thought Lyra might have backed off a bit after the awkwardness had cooled down. She seemed to understand that giving me a commitment ring was definitely not the way to go about human bonding. I figured we could go back to normal, roommates with some weird cultural misunderstandings here and there, but nothing too serious. But I was wrong. It started subtly at first. She began leaving little gifts around the apartment, odd, alien-looking objects she claimed were tokens of affection. The first one was a small stone, glowing with an eerie greenish hue. The second, a floating crystal sphere that hummed faintly when touched. The third, a series of intricate sketches she made of, me. I had to admit, the drawings were impressive, even if they looked more like something out of a sci-fi movie than real human portraits. Still, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable as each gift piled up. It was like she was trying to win me over, as if she thought this was the standard human way of courting someone. One evening, after I had just come back from work, I found her sitting on the couch, staring at me expectantly, as though waiting for some sort of grand reveal. I sighed and took off my shoes. What is it now, Lyra? I asked, already bracing myself for the latest misunderstanding. I have learned more about Earth customs, she said brightly, her tendrils curling in excitement. And I have discovered that many species enjoy spending quality time together in what you call date night. I've researched activities that would be appropriate for such an event. I blinked. Wait, date night? You're still... Lyra, no, we talked about this already. She cut me off before I could say anything else. This is different. I have prepared a special evening to deepen our emotional connection. You are my roommate and I value our bond. I have been practicing something called cooking. Oh no. My stomach dropped as she stood up and gestured toward the kitchen. It didn't take long for me to realize that her idea of cooking was, more experimental than anything. When I walked into the kitchen, my worst fears were realized. There were strange, glowing liquids in various containers, bubbling ominously. A thick, heavy-smelling smoke filled the air. The stove was covered in alien technology that I couldn't even begin to understand, and on the counter sat a massive bowl filled with a mass of what looked like, wait a second, was that intestines? I recoiled. Lyra, what the hell is that? She grinned at me, clearly proud of her creation. It is called human comfort food, she explained. I've analyzed your culture and concluded that you often enjoy something called pizza. I have made one with my own twist. What? I couldn't help but laugh nervously. No. That's not pizza. I've seen many examples of pizza, and I have combined all the ingredients I found most commonly associated with the dish. I even added some additional protein sources that I thought might be more to your liking. I blinked at the pizza-like monstrosity before me. It was definitely not pizza. It looked like a combination of human food and alien slime. I couldn't even tell if it was edible. A mix of gooey, glowing cheese and something that looked like it could either be seaweed or just pure mush lay on top of a crust that seemed to pulsate. You made this? I said, eyeing the strange concoction. This is not pizza. This is something out of a horror movie. No offense. Lyra looked crushed. I thought you would enjoy it. Humans seem to appreciate food made with care. I've watched many programs that emphasize the importance of homemade meals. Yeah, but Lyra, there's a difference between homemade and whatever this is. I couldn't stop myself from laughing, even though I knew it would hurt her feelings. I'm sure you put a lot of effort into it, but this isn't what I meant by pizza. Her eyes dimmed, her tendrils dropping. I see, she said quietly. I misunderstood again. I am sorry. Now I felt terrible. I knew she was trying her best, but it was clear I had not communicated the human concept of cooking to her in a way that made sense. It's okay, Lyra. You didn't know. But, maybe we should try ordering in? Something a little more familiar, you know? She nodded, clearly not thrilled by the suggestion, but also understanding that I wasn't entirely rejecting her. I will learn. I'll study more human food preparations, she said. It's important to understand the significance of meals in the bonding process. At this point, I had to wonder just how far Lyra would go in her quest to bond with me. Every day felt like a new experiment, with her trying to take things further and further into territory I wasn't sure I was comfortable with. It wasn't that I didn't like her. I really did. She was just different, and her lack of understanding about human emotions and boundaries was beginning to take its toll on me. As the days went by, I started to feel more and more suffocated. It wasn't just the gifts anymore. It was the constant pressure. Lyra wasn't giving me any space. She was always there, constantly wanting to talk, cook, bond, and understand me in ways that felt like too much. And the worst part? I wasn't sure how to tell her to stop. It wasn't like she was intentionally overstepping boundaries. She was genuinely trying to understand what I wanted, what I needed, and how I felt. But her approach was so intense. Every time I tried to take a step back or create a little space, she just seemed to push forward harder, thinking that if she tried harder, I'd eventually get it. There was no easy way to explain this to her either. How do you tell someone, or something, that you need space without hurting their feelings? How do you explain that while you're grateful for their effort, the constant bombardment of their affection feels like too much? I didn't want to crush her enthusiasm, but I also didn't want to lose my mind from all the emotional pressure. Then, one evening, after another failed attempt at bonding over yet another strange alien recipe, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something. Lyra, we need to talk, I said, my voice shaky. She looked up, her tendrils drooping slightly as though sensing my discomfort. The days following our conversation about boundaries were, to say the least, a bit awkward. Lyra seemed to take my request for space seriously, but I could tell it hurt her. She became quieter, her usual bursts of enthusiasm tempered with a new wariness, as though she was constantly second-guessing every word she said or every action she took. At first, I thought this would be a relief. Finally, some breathing room, but in reality, it made me feel more like I was the one responsible for her discomfort. I felt terrible. In trying to assert my need for space, I'd unintentionally made her feel rejected. The guilt gnawed at me, and it didn't help that Lyra was so damn good at being vulnerable. She had this way of looking at me with those wide eyes, her tendrils drooping just enough to signal her disappointment, that made it impossible to not feel guilty every time I saw her. It didn't help that my attempts at finding a normal routine were interrupted by her constant research into human interactions. Sure, she was quieter, but it was like she was still processing our conversation on a deeper level, trying to find a new way to approach me. I couldn't even have a conversation with her without her dropping some new fact about human culture. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, trying to unwind from a stressful day at work, when I heard Lyra's voice from the other side of the room. Human. Alone time. I found something, she said tentatively, walking toward me. I understand that sometimes you need space to think. I've been studying personal hobbies. I've read that engaging in a solitary activity is often helpful. I raised an eyebrow. Personal hobbies? Like what? Lyra handed me a strange, rectangular object. I've acquired one of these. It is a device you use to watch things. I have found that many humans engage with these to relax. It was a remote control. You mean TV? Yes, TV. I've read about it in your media files. It is considered a personal activity, so I thought it might be helpful for your need to be alone. I have also prepared snacks. She gestured to a tray that was now sitting on the coffee table. A tray that was once again filled with bizarre, glowing food. Couldn't help but chuckle. It was the first time I'd seen her make such a simple, thoughtful gesture in a while. Thanks, Lyra. You didn't have to do this, but I appreciate it. She smiled, the faintest glow returning to her skin, and sat down beside me on the couch, clearly unsure of her next move. I hope you like it, she said softly. I wanted to try something you might enjoy. I glanced at the food she'd brought. More of the bizarre, glowing fruit, a pile of what seemed like energy bars wrapped in some kind of transparent film, and a small container of what looked like solidified juice. Despite my lingering fears about what it actually was, I took a cautious bite of the fruit. Surprisingly, it wasn't as bad as I thought. It had a sweet, almost familiar taste, if you ignored the fact that it glowed faintly in the dark. Lyra was watching me closely, as if she was trying to gauge my reaction. Is it good? She asked. Actually, it's not bad. I mean, it's different, but it's definitely edible. I took another bite, genuinely impressed. Where did you find this stuff? I have been exploring your food databases more, she said, still eyeing me with that strange curiosity. I've been trying to understand how humans feel about food. It's important for bonding, correct? I couldn't help but smile. Despite everything, despite the weirdness and the misunderstandings, there was something endearing about Lyra's attempt to fit into my world. She didn't know what she was doing, and she often got things wrong. But the effort was there, and it made me feel like I couldn't just push her away entirely, no matter how complicated everything was becoming. I was about to thank her again when something strange happened. Lyra's tendrils twitched nervously, and her voice grew quieter. I have been wondering, she began, hesitating as if choosing her words carefully. Do you believe there is a way for us to truly understand each other? I've read about how humans connect on an emotional level, but I don't know if I understand it. I want to understand you. I want to be a good roommate, a good friend. Her voice was soft, and the sincerity behind her words made my heart clench a little. The guilt, which had been hanging over me for days, hit me full force. I realized that while I had been trying to put emotional distance between us, Lyra wasn't just some alien who was clueless about human interactions. She was trying. And maybe it wasn't fair of me to shut her down so completely, just because I was feeling overwhelmed. She was doing her best, and while that didn't mean everything she did would be perfect, it deserved acknowledgement. I put down the food and looked at her, meeting her gaze. Lyra? I started softly, trying to find the right words. I think we are already understanding each other in a way. You're trying to figure out how to live here, and I'm trying to help you with that. We might not have everything figured out, but I think we can get there. I just need you to know that it's going to take time. She nodded slowly, her tendrils vibrating lightly in a way I could only assume was her version of a smile. I can wait. I will try to learn as much as I can, but I will not rush you. That simple declaration, the way she said it, made me feel a mix of emotions I hadn't anticipated. In a way, I felt guilty for not giving her the benefit of the doubt earlier. She wasn't just some curious alien. She was genuinely invested in our relationship, whatever it was. And it was starting to feel like I owed her more than just my patience. I owed her understanding too. But the hardest part was that I wasn't sure if I wanted the kind of relationship she was hoping for. I didn't know if I wanted to be more than just roommates. I didn't know if I could handle being that close to someone, alien or not. After everything I'd been through in my own life, I wasn't ready to open up to anyone in the way she was asking. But maybe, just maybe, that didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was that we were both trying. Maybe the bond we were building, awkward and strange as it was enough for now. I think we're both going to have to figure this out together, I said finally. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you want to try. Lyra looked relieved, her tendrils vibrating gently in a soft rhythm. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll do my best to learn. And as I sat there, with her quietly by my side, I realized that while we were far from understanding each other completely, we were at least learning. Step by step, day by day, slowly but surely we were building something. Something that might have started with misunderstandings, but was starting to feel like it had the potential to become something more. At that moment, I didn't have all the answers, but I had Lyra's sincerity, and sometimes that was enough. The days following our heart-to-heart were, surprisingly, quieter. Lyra seemed to have taken my words about space and boundaries to heart, and I had to give her credit. She was respecting my need for personal time. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when her alien enthusiasm would bubble up unexpectedly. But we were finding a rhythm. I had almost begun to relax, to enjoy the new normal we were creating. It wasn't the weird, awkward, confusing mess it had been in the beginning. Lyra had started focusing her energies on her research, more on Earth culture, human behaviors, and daily life. The more she learned, the more she tried to tailor her approach to me. I couldn't deny that it was kind of sweet. I'd even caught myself looking forward to some of our conversations, like when she would try to teach me about alien customs or share a funny observation about human habits that I'd never really thought about. But still, something lingered, something unspoken, a tension in the air between us that I couldn't quite figure out how to address. We were both tiptoeing around the same issue, each trying to figure out what it meant to live together without crossing lines, without getting too close. And then it happened. One night, I came home from work later than usual. I'd been stuck in traffic for over an hour, and by the time I got to the apartment, I was exhausted. The last thing I wanted was to deal with anything weird or complicated. But when I walked in, something felt different. There was an unfamiliar scent in the air, something sweet and comforting. I glanced around the living room to find Lyra sitting on the couch, holding a small bowl of something in her hands. The room was dimly lit, and for a second, everything felt strangely cozy, like we were in a little bubble, separate from the chaos of the world outside. Hey, I said, setting my bag down, still a little unsure of what was going on. Lyra looked up, her tendrils slightly raised, which I knew was a sign that she was feeling more energetic than usual. She smiled, an expression that had become more familiar over the past few weeks. I've been learning about surprises, she said, her voice almost shy. Humans enjoy surprises. I thought you might like this. I raised an eyebrow. A surprise? What is it? She gestured to the bowl in her hands, which was filled with a mixture of various fruits. Fruits that looked almost normal, except they were glowing faintly, like everything else she made. There were some that looked like peaches, others like grapes, and a few that I couldn't quite place. The mix of colors was almost beautiful, like an alien dessert you'd find in a space-themed movie. I thought it might be a good idea to try something new. A human custom I read about called comfort food. Her voice wavered, as if unsure of how it would be received. I could see the effort she'd put into this, and honestly, it warmed my heart. The tension in my chest eased slightly as I walked over and took the bowl from her. Well, it looks pretty cool. Let's see if it's as good as it looks. I picked up a piece of glowing fruit and hesitated for just a moment before popping it into my mouth. The taste was unlike anything I'd ever had, sweet, a little tangy, and it had an odd texture that was almost creamy. It was good, really good. Wow, I said, surprised. This is amazing. What did you put in it? Lyra's eyes glowed brighter as she watched me enjoy it. I've been experimenting. I thought you might like something with both familiar flavors and something new. It's a mix of human and alien ingredients. I researched fruit combinations that are considered comforting and nourishing to your species. I nodded, impressed. You've really been doing your homework, huh? I have, she said, her voice full of pride. I want to be the best roommate I can be. I want you to feel at ease. I couldn't help but smile, even though there was still that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. She was doing all this to bond with me, to make me feel like she was a part of my world. But I wasn't sure I could return the sentiment. We sat together in silence for a moment, each of us eating the fruit in the dim glow of the apartment. I could hear the hum of the city outside, the distant sounds of cars and people, but inside, it felt oddly peaceful. The kind of quiet that made me think maybe things were going to be okay between us. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to coexist without all the awkwardness and misunderstandings. But then, Just as I was starting to relax, Lyra said something that made my heart skip a beat. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "I know I've been trying to understand human customs and emotions, but I also want you to understand something important about me." I looked up, a little concerned by the tone of her voice. "What is it?" Lyra took a deep breath. "I want you to understand why I've been so eager to bond with you, to get closer. It's not just because I want to fit in. It's because, well, I care about you. I want to be more than just roommates." I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest as I tried to process what she was saying. This wasn't just a friendly gesture. This was something more. She was crossing the line whether she realized it or not. "I know I've made mistakes," she continued, her tendrils curling nervously. "And I know I don't fully understand your species, but I'm trying. I really am. And the more time we spend together, the more I realize I'm not just trying to understand humans. I'm trying to understand you." I swallowed hard, trying to find the words. But before I could speak, Lyra's expression softened, and she reached out to place her hand gently on mine, her cool, soft skin brushing against mine. Her eyes locked onto mine with a vulnerability that made my breath catch in my throat. "I know it's not the same for you," she said quietly, "but I want you to know that I feel something for you, something deeper than just roommates. And I don't want you to feel pressured, but I had to tell you. I don't want to hide it anymore." Her words hung in the air, filling the space between us like an electric charge. I could feel the weight of her confession, the honesty in her eyes, and the sincerity in her voice. And for a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. But then reality hit, hard. I pulled my hand away, feeling a rush of panic flood through me. "Lyra, I stopped myself, struggling to put my thoughts into words. "I'm not sure what to say. I didn't expect this. I don't know if I'm ready for that. For anything like that." She nodded slowly, her tendrils drooping slightly, as though she understood but couldn't fully accept it. "I understand," she said quietly. "It's just, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore." The air between us grew thick with tension. I didn't know how to navigate this. I didn't know how to handle her feelings when I wasn't sure what mine were. I wasn't even sure what I wanted from our relationship anymore. I cared about her, yes, but in a way that felt different from what she was hoping for. I need time, Lyra," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what this is. I don't know what I want." She seemed to accept that, her expression softening with a sad smile. "I'll wait. I can wait for you. I just wanted to be honest with you. I didn't want to hide how I feel." It was one of the most vulnerable things anyone had ever said to me, and I felt a deep pit form in my stomach. I didn't want to hurt her, but I wasn't sure I could be the person she wanted me to be. We sat there in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say next. The room felt both intimate and heavy with unspoken emotions, and I couldn't help but wonder how much longer we could keep living like this, caught between friendship and something more. The truth was, I didn't know where this was going, but I knew that I couldn't run from it. Not anymore. The next few days felt like walking on a tightrope. The air between Lyra and me was charged with unspoken words, with emotions neither of us knew how to deal with. I could sense her trying to respect my space, but there was a lingering sadness in her eyes that made me feel guilty for not giving her the answer she wanted. She kept herself busy, researching, experimenting with new foods, learning more about human behavior, but every time I saw her, it was like she was holding back, and I wasn't sure what to do about it. I didn't want to push her away completely, but I didn't know if I was ready to open my heart up to someone else, especially someone so different. Yet, as much as I kept telling myself to maintain distance, I couldn't ignore the fact that she was trying. She was trying so hard to fit into my world, to understand me, to be a part of my life, and I couldn't help but appreciate that. But then, the inevitable happened. One evening, after dinner, I was sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone when Lyra walked in, her posture different from the usual confidence she carried. She seemed hesitant, almost fragile, as she stopped in front of me. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There was something in her eyes, something raw, something unguarded, that made my heart tighten. I put my phone down and nodded, gesturing for her to sit beside me. Lyra took a deep breath, her tendrils swaying nervously. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing time, about how you weren't sure what we are." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just listened, waiting for her to continue. I think I understand now, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. I think I've been rushing things. I've been so focused on trying to make everything perfect, trying to understand how you feel, that I didn't stop to consider how you might need time to come to your own conclusions. I'm sorry if I made you feel pressured. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and the vulnerability in the way she was sitting. So small, so uncertain. My chest tightened with guilt, realizing that maybe I hadn't been as honest with her as I should have been either. I didn't want to hurt you, she continued, her gaze never leaving mine. I care about you, more than I've let on. But I don't want to make things harder for you. If you need space, I'll give it to you. I just want you to know how I feel. Her words were like a weight lifting off my shoulders. In a way, it felt like she had been carrying the burden of this unspoken tension for both of us. And now she was letting go of it, leaving it in my hands. I took a deep breath. Lyra, you don't have to apologize. You've done nothing wrong. I think I've been scared, too. She looked at me, confused. Scared. I nodded. Yeah, scared that if I let myself get too close, I'd get hurt. I've been through a lot, and I didn't know how to open up to you. I didn't know how to let someone in again, especially someone like you. She tilted her head, her tendrils swaying in a way that almost looked curious. Someone like me? I smiled softly. Yeah, someone different. Someone from a completely different world. But I hesitated, taking her hand in mine. But you're right. I've been shutting you out, and I don't want to keep doing that. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time in days, I saw a spark of hope in them. I don't need to rush anything, I said, squeezing her hand. I think we've been getting to know each other in our own way, and maybe that's enough for now. I don't know what this is, or where it's going, but I don't want to lose you, Lyra. I just need time. But we can take that time together, at our own pace. Her face lit up, and I felt the tension between us start to dissolve, piece by piece. I can wait, she whispered. I don't need you to have all the answers right away. I just want to be with you. I'll wait as long as it takes. I felt something shift inside me. It was like a weight had been lifted, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of what might happen next. I didn't need to have everything figured out right now. What mattered was that we were here, together, trying to figure it out. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next few weeks passed in a way that felt almost normal. Lyra and I continued our odd little routine, but there was a new sense of understanding between us. We still had our moments of awkwardness. After all, she was still an alien and I was still just a human, but it didn't matter as much anymore. We didn't need to rush anything. We just enjoyed each other's company. We talked. We shared our thoughts. We laughed. One evening, after a long day of work, I came home to find Lyra sitting on the couch, waiting for me. This time, she didn't have any surprise food or alien experiments. She was just there, looking at me with the same warmth in her eyes that had always been there. I've been thinking, she said softly. Maybe we don't need to label this, whatever this is between us. Maybe it doesn't have to be friend or more. Maybe it's just us, two beings, learning from each other, sharing time together. I smiled, feeling the knot in my chest loosen. Yeah, I agreed, sitting down next to her. I think that sounds perfect. And for the first time, I realized that I didn't need to have everything figured out. I didn't need to know where this was going. All that mattered was that we were together, taking it one step at a time. No labels, no expectations, just two beings, one human, one alien, finding their way in a world that, for all its differences, had a place for both of them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and that was all that mattered. As I sat there next to Lyra, our hands intertwined, I couldn't help but smile. Whatever this was, whatever we would become, I was ready to take it on. Together.